The wheel landed on Utah. We're going to Salt Lake City. The wheel landed on Utah. We're going to Salt Lake City. So let's talk some ball. All right, let's talk some ball. The Utah Utes, right? That's an interesting name. The Utah Utes, right? So let's talk about good old Utah. And things have changed. Things have changed for Utah, right? This is not the same Utah team. This is a team for the first time in a while without head coach Kyle Whittingham, who's been there since Urban Meyer left, right? Who's been there since Urban Meyer left, right? This is now the Morgan Scalley era, right? In Utah, right? So what does the identity look like? Utah, known for a team primarily that will dog you through the run game, that will play hard defense, that you went to Utah and it was hard to get a win. From the Pac-12 days to even the Big 12 days, right? Fell off a little bit last year, right? Battled some injuries, but needless to say, they finished 14, get a nice bowl win, right, this past year. Lose Kyle Whittingham. I think they were ready to move on from Kyle. Now, what does this team look like now? Let's dive into it. Key returners for Utah. You see the guy on the screen, Devin Dampier, right? You see him, right? Devin Dampier threw for 2,490 passing yards, a 24 touchdown to 5 interception ratio, only completed about 63%. However, 835 on the ground with 10 touchdowns. This guy, damn near, you could say, 34 touchdowns, right? 34 touchdowns for Utah, given a different dynamic, a quarterback who was a little bit more mobile than the Cam Rising, that was there, right? So, Utah, being that they have Dampier coming back, that's a huge plus. That's a huge plus in how Morgan Scalley is going to get off on the right foot heading into the season, heading into another Big 12 season. Not to mention, Dale Bray had a great freshman year last year. He's coming back. He has a lot of momentum as well, too. On the defensive side, Jackson Benny, right? I think he had 4 interceptions last season. Right, 4 interceptions last season. And then you can't forget about Cash Dillon, and I'll explain why when we get to that segment. And we'll get there very quickly, right? But you can't forget about Cash Dillon, 3.5 sacks last year, 35 tackles, I believe, right? So they got some key players coming back at key positions, running back, quarterback. They even have 2 quarterbacks, actually, that could do damage, right? And then they got a defensive edge, a defensive end, and they got a DB as well, too. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, right? Elephant in the room. And that is them losing their main guy. Where's he at? I forgot his name. Let me look it up. John Henry Daly, the Michigan. Maybe one of the top 5 defensive players in the transfer portal this past year. Lost him, followed Kyle Whittingham to Michigan. So Cash Dillon now has some big shoes to fill, right, in regards to that production, right? In regards to that production. People forget, Utah's defense, especially up front, lost all their starters, whether it was to the draft or the transfer portal. On the offensive side, you lose your both left and right tackle, who are going to be draft picks probably before Saturday, right? So Utah's got some catching up to do, right? They got some things they need to glue together. Now, you think about that. When you talked about Cash Dillon replacing John Henry Daly, who's replacing the O-lineman? Utah, what's his name? Kelvin Obot, 5-star offensive lineman. Utah's highest rated recruit is coming in to compete for one of those offensive lineman spots. Not to mention, transfer offensive lineman sophomore Cedric Joseph from Montana State is coming in to compete for one of those left or right tackles, right? So they're going to be young, maybe a little inexperienced, right? But it also helps when you have a mobile quarterback. How does Morgan Scalley make sure this team doesn't take a drop off and really could get back to the team that a lot of us thought they were, right? And really contend for the Big 12, right? Really contend for the Big 12. Let's dive into their schedule. All right, let's dive into the schedule a little bit. Now, you look at their schedule. All right, week 1 versus Idaho. Comfortably should be a win. And you got Arkansas, Silverfield, right? Really taking over that team now. What is that Arkansas team? This might be their first real test for both teams. Utah State should take care of business. Iowa State, they lost a ton of guys. What's that team going to look like? Nobody knows, right? Kansas, you start getting the Big 12 play. Colorado, Houston, Cincinnati. And then you got the Civil War, right? Not the Civil War. Wow, I really messed that up. I don't mean the Civil War. The rival versus BYU, right? The rival versus BYU. The Holy War. Jesus. Don't get mad at me, Utah fans. I'm sorry. All right. And I know this is my first time being introduced to you guys down in Salt Lake City. First time you're probably watching me talk ball. My bad. The Holy War. The Holy War versus BYU, right? Which is going to be a big game. Which is going to be a big game. But look at the rest of their schedule. Arizona, TCU, West Virginia, a team that I think a lot of people are sleeping on is going to be good. But this is a very manageable schedule for Utah, right? A very manageable schedule. They could easily get back into conference championship play, really, looking at this schedule, right? It's not a hard schedule, especially looking at some of the teams we've already done, right, with this wheel. It's probably the lightest out of all the teams we've done so far, out of all the teams that we talked about in the top 25 thus far, right? Very manageable schedule, right? So what do they do with it, right? And this is going to be a big test for Morgan Scalley because, yeah, the schedule's not overly hard, but with that comes expectations. How do you manage those expectations? What's the identity of this team? Young on the offensive and defensive fronts, right? Question marks heading into spring ball, right? And Utah fans, if you're in here, drop a comment. Let me know what you think. O-line, who's replacing the production, right? How quick can those young guys develop and catch up, right? Not to mention, you're replacing every starter on the defensive front. How well can they gel, right? How well can, they play as one up front? Whether it's stunning, switching, right? Cash Dillon has to be the one to lead that charge, right? And then Dampier, is he enough did he do enough to take his game to the next level, to take Utah to the next level?